complicated, you know, man. Like a dang Rubik's Cube, man. You like talking about blue, red, man, then you get to one side and like messed up.
If you share my lack of faith in our health system, you should take control of your well-being. Building resilience and maintaining good health for the long term needs to be a priority. Axios Remote Fitness Coaching offers one-stop expert advice on training, diet, and lifestyle. You can purchase customized workout plans for strength training or structured exercise. If you're serious about maximizing your potential, you can book time with a coach or customize your routine and get video feedback on your performance. I know the owner, and he's one of us. Visit Axios and support those who support the show. Follow the link in the description to become a man of action with Axios. No one blames you for being weak, but it's your fault if you stay that way. All right, Luthemplar, welcome to the Jay Burden Show. How are you doing, man?
I'm eager to see total alien death.
So this is funny, and these are in general the most fun episodes, right? Where we have a topic planned, and then it's like, well, wouldn't it be more fun if we talked about something else? And so this is actually kind of a through line from the first couple shows we did together, which were about the three body problem. Which if you haven't listened to those, you should. And the context of that is it's a Chinese sci-fi story surrounding first contact with an alien civilization. We talk about it at some great length. But this is obviously something that is kind of crossed over with the news. So Luthemplar, do you want to just jump straight in and kind of provide people the background context for this discussion?
Yeah, I'm going to be reading from this part 2 of my alien Substack thing that I did, where I posted some like credentials of the guy claiming this stuff, and then like why it's ridiculous. So most of this comes from David Grosh, the leaker from the Department of Defense something department. He is a reputable guy. I created a bit of a timeline. So essentially back in 2017, someone from a clandestine organization reached out to him saying, listen, here are all the documents I have. I can't go public with this because I have an NDA and everything. You can investigate this. And Grosh spent 4 years investigating this. And in 2021, he filed a report to Sean O'Donnell, who's Inspector General of the Department of Defense. He's currently moved on to the Inspector General for the EPA, which is an interesting switch. And he basically wrote up here's my complaints with some of the stuff that government organizations that don't have much oversight are doing. Later on, he believes his identity was shared around, which is in violation of the U.S.'s whistleblower laws. So he's kind of saying, hey, my people above me stabbed me in the back a little bit. It wasn't Sean O'Donnell. O'Donnell started his own investigation, and essentially a year later said that these findings from Grush are quote unquote credible and urgent. So this is the official Inspector General of the Department of Defense saying, hey, this is actually real. There's some problems. Now, the core issue here is a lack of oversight. This is a thing I have to emphasize. The issue that Grosh brought to O'Donnell was these are clandestine organizations which are essentially funneling money and not having any oversight on where the money's going. That was the issue. Now, O'Donnell filed his official stamp of approval on the complaint in July 2022, and throughout that time, as a result of it, when the Inspector General says that something's credible or urgent, it triggers an automatic email send out basically within the defense network. And so Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines got a report. Senate Select Committee got on Intelligence head by Mark Warner and Marco Rubio got the report. House Permanent Select Committee and Intelligence head by Adam Schiff and Mike Turner got the report. So this is a pretty wide range of people that automatically receive the report once it's found credible and urgent. You have a lot of Democrats and Republicans in there, so it's kind of a broad spectrum. The complaint was then signed by Mr. Grosh saying, I under penalty of perjury, I say everything I said was true, and the Inspector General has backed me up on this. So this is kind of the formation of a sect within the Defense Department saying, hey, we have money going places we don't know, doing things we don't know. It needs more oversight. And so this instantly makes Congress want to get some attention on it because it makes them look like they're doing their jobs, even though they're not. In December 2022, Mr. Grush was this is interesting. He was invited by Congress to write new laws to protect him. So before he went public, with Congress knowing that there was an issue and the Inspector General knowing the issue, Congress actually invited a whistleblower to make laws to protect him when he goes public. That's a very interesting thing. I can't think of any real moment in modern history where Congress has decided we want to protect this guy before he goes public. That's very interesting. And that was basically 2022 in December. This was the foundation for the National Defense Authorization Act of the fiscal year of 2023, in which essentially whistleblowers like Mr. Grosh were officially protected by law. Now, it's important to make a distinction here between what's protected by law and these like clandestine organizations which kind of like operate above the law until they're called to account by Congress. You follow me so far?
I'm following you.
Yeah, so that's basically where we come to the start of 2023, where the legal framework was established to protect Grush to go public. My conspiracy brain is like, the only reason why Congress would protect this guy is if they're planning something, right? It's kind of weird. But it all sounds very official. Now, if you look at what he actually charges in public, aside from this complaint, again, the complaint, I don't think it's been really made public right now. It's just kind of like, here's a list of complaints. We're not allowed to say it in public. Congress knows, the Department of Defense Inspector General knows, and the public's not allowed to know yet. So we'll see if that changes. It's a weird way where like Congress can know these secrets if they have the security clearance, which ironically Mr. Grush has higher clearance than some of the people investigating it, so he's literally not allowed to share it to some members of Congress. He's only allowed to say, hey, this is an issue. But publicly, he's made known that he has this report that claims in 1930 Mussolini found a UFO, which is kind of weird. And apparently this UFO that was crashed in Italy during the war, America got after the war from looting in Italy. So the first UFO that the United States supposedly got was in 1930, not Roswell in 1947. That's an interesting little tidbit. What that was and what amounts to it, who knows? It's not public. Then 1947, he said Roswell really was a downcraft, which is kind of weird because it's kind of been debunked a billion times. He then says in 1967, there's a documented case where 10 ICBMs were deactivated by a UFO, which is interesting. And in the Cold War, Russia has downed a few craft too. And so there's this kind of like Cold War within a Cold War of this unknown technology. He says that the craft are primarily brought down by tricking them, by like getting them to crash into mountains or like pushing them into places where they can't maneuver and then they crash. Kind of like the Independence Day scene where Will Smith crashes a UFO by flying through the Grand Canyon. A lot of it seems a little like Hollywoodish. He claims that there were deaths involved with the material. He hasn't said specifically, but he's hinted that it's radioactive. And that basically this is like the outline. Like the outline that he's saying is that we have multiple UFOs and bodies and all that. And that's just I love Jacob's comment. Mamma mia.
I will say the comments on this have been great. But
Mamma mia, the little green men, they come and take up my spaghetti. Yeah, so that's the outline of it. And so Grosh is kind of like, it's weird. Congress is propping him up, but is not all members of Congress are allowed to know what exactly his report holds because it's security clearance stuff. Now, there have been a lot of videos that came out from both before the hearing and during the hearing, some officially released, some leaked. And pretty much every one of them can be debunked with basic like camera and physics. Like there's that night vision footage of triangles in the sky from an aircraft carrier. And if you look at the camera, it has a triangulated tape around the lenses. And so you know that the light that's capturing is just refraction from the triangle lens. This was like debunked. There's that footage of a UFO flying and maneuvering, like the Tic Tac video that's grayed out. It's a heat sink. It's a heat video. Heat vision, infrared vision camera. And this has been pretty debunked by being just like a jet engine. It's not that big of a deal. Most of the stuff that's leaked out from this has ended up being kind of like really poor quality, obviously nonsense things that the government is claiming is UFOs for real. It's like, okay, not really though.
So here's, and this is the frame in which I've been kind of approaching this, right? Which is that to me, I'm kind of fascinated by the Overton window in the sense of, what narratives are kind of safe to address and which ones aren't, right?
Yeah.
And the topic of conspiracy has been in the news recently as well, right? I think it was Yuval Harari basically said that we need to we need to put conspirators in camps practically. I believe the exact word is they need to be eliminated. And it brings up that interesting idea of like, well, what is that topic of like conspiracy theory? Because like the Hollywood version of it is kind of like David Icke, like some guy who basically thinks that like lizard people, aliens are secretly controlling the world in kind of a monolithic cabal.
Yeah.
And this is kind of kissing cousins to kind of like the UFO sphere, right? The idea of, there being kind of like, this like shadowy government organization designed to cover this up, and you see this in a lot of kind of boomer conspiracy circles, especially of kind of a previous era. And so what's interesting to me is not that UFOs are in the news, because that's kind of always around, but the fact that it's receiving some type of official backing. So what do you make of the fact that this is actually getting, institutional backing from, high members of Congress, and it's getting TV time, right? And obviously getting TV time and backing from members of Congress doesn't indicate anything about its validity or truth, right? But it does indicate that the regime would like you to be aware of this.
Yeah, and I have a thought that the United States has been essentially pumping out panic after panic to try and keep people distracted from looking at the government, and this just feels like increasingly lower quality panics it's trying to stir up. COVID, people kind of lost faith in that panic pretty quickly, and they're like, "Oh crap, Russia! Oh no, no one cares about it." Turns out Russia can't really be a big baddie when they can't take a fucking swamp. So. Then they're like, UFOs, aliens, that's the new panic. Yeah. It's like, it just kind of comes off as like they're desperate to try and distract and not pay attention.
Well, it's jangling keys.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that much like JFK or much like, Bigfoot or something like that, aliens are like a harmless conspiracy in a way. Right? That, like, to be honest, have you ever heard of someone getting fired for their job for being a UFO kook?
No, but they're oftentimes cornered to the hot corner of the room by the bathroom.
Well, that's true, right? But there's a difference between, being a UFO kook, being a Bigfoot kook, and then, having certain trepidations about, 20th century history. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
How's that for a delicate way to put it?
Yeah.
And I think that there is something really weird about it. And it's sort of the same thing. It's like a much shittier version of like any time that, we decide it's time to like put, like a show member of the intelligence community on trial, where it's like, we as your government have been doing something wrong, but we've decided to stop doing things that are wrong. And it because we say that we've stopped doing it. It's sort of that mafia investigates mafia sort of thing. And when I see something like this, like, you're 100% right. It just comes across as like a very badly done distraction.
Yeah, and like, why would they want the distraction now? I think there are a number of reasons why they might be trying to like, quickly grab pocket sand of every kind they can find. It looks like the Ukraine war isn't cooking up as they thought it would. It's just kind of like mellowing into this trench warfare that'll never end. It looks like the economy's still like kind of like going up, but not as fast as they wanted. And of course, the competency crisis is increasing. So they really need something to distract as they try to loot the last bits that they can before everything goes into another recession. I don't know, a lot of the times, the Congress members that are involved, like Rubio and Schiff, these are like nefarious characters with a lot of weird connections to defense and different corporations. And you just kind of view it as like, well, I mean, yeah, maybe you can get a little bit more defense pennies if you make people into a fright that they need some kind of planetary defense systems or something.
The Space Force, right?
Yeah, even the Space Force. You know, if you look at Trump's speeches, why did he want a Space Force? There were two things he outlined: asteroids and UFOs. So it's kind of like, okay, neither of those are particularly dangerous at this point in history. They could become dangerous. Well, at least asteroids are real, you know. But it just kind of comes off as silly.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the other thing, and I feel like, you know, I'm a little bit younger than you, so maybe you had a different experience of this. But I feel like the first time I really remember there being kind of like a political circus going on in Congress, right? Where it was very obvious to me, at least, that this was something being done exclusively as to kind of like a way to mug for the camera, right? To get a soundbite. I think it was like 2011 or 2012 when Republicans had Congress, and they basically decided to threaten to bring. It was the filibuster, right? They were going to bring the government to a halt to to do something about the budget. I can't remember, but I remember
the government shutdown.
Yeah, the government shutdown. Sorry, there was another similar thing with Obamacare, where it was basically like well, I'm just going to sit in front of a camera and make a big show, you know.
Sorry, go on.
No, my point in this is not just to to date myself, but it's to say that like it does kind of feel like there's an element of like middle school theater to it, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's just like
I had fun during the government shutdown. Back then I had a what's that like Australian musical instrument that's like
it's a didgeridoo.
I had a PVC didgeridoo. Don't ask how I made a PVC pipe into a didgeridoo. When the government shut down, I lived on the top of the hill of my campus. I took up my didgeridoo and I started playing at midnight when the shutdown happened and announced the government has fallen, and then started playing it like on a loudspeaker.
The cops can't catch me. They don't have money.
Exactly. And throughout the week, people was asking, who's that guy who blasted on the didgeridoo that the government shut this collapse? What was going on the hill? It's just like I was legendary on campus for a while. And then as a troll, my roommate was he had an internship at NASA, so I went to all of his cups and plaques with NASA, and I put like the sign they put up to shut down parks and everything when the government shut down. I printed it out and put it into all of his NASA nostalgia. Like, this cup is currently shut down. It was fun.
So anyway,
it was fun. Yeah, back to aliens.
I like the idea. This is something that I always think is stupid. Have you ever watched the Purge movies?
Yeah.
The whole conception is that like, oh, like the government shuts down and immediately everyone just becomes a homicidal maniac.
It's amazing how no one ever commits vast financial crimes during those times.
or a didgeridoo performance art, right? Yeah. It's the Purge. No one can stop me.
Anyway, but like, so I'll switch topic there. I've seen UFOs. I have seen. I linked in the private chat an example of one I recorded by where I live, where I've seen weird things, because I do live in an area that gets if you zoom in, I'm not sure if you have between Twitter's compression and Streamlabs compression, there you go, that little dot right there, and that's just one, and then it starts getting more, like several dots show up, and it was like a fleet of little balls that went through the sky. There was maybe about like 10 of them or so, and that Twitter thread I took some photographs to show it. But there were like these little orbs that flew over my house, and I live in an area that has like a pretty good consistent like valley feature where thunderstorms form, and I was convinced this is just ball lightning. It's just like there's a lightning storm and then the remnant electricity is just floating around in a ball form. This happens. Who cares? It's just a natural phenomenon. I've seen weird things. I know that there's a lot of experimental aircraft and stuff like that. And it just seems odd that, like, you're an advanced civilization and you can go anywhere at the speed of light or faster. And you decide to spend your holiday naked stalking in the woods somewhere for like young children or something, right? Like that's the aliens, the naked gray bodies in the forest, right? So what, do they treat Earth as like a nudist beach or something? It's just ridiculous.
Well, right. And there's sort of something about it, which is that like you can't really separate people's conception of aliens from Hollywood. And this is one of the things that I think some of the more schizophrenic people in our circles have kind of brought up, right? Which is this idea of like aliens as essentially a way to get people to do, you know, what the government wanted them to do anyway, right? Which is like aliens say, you know, climate change is bad. You know, where aliens say form a one world government with a singular currency.
I've seen the meme.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a meme for a reason. But it is interesting, right? When you see, you know, kind of first contact films and media, you know, of any type, right? Which is, let's be honest, there's a lot of kind of, and I don't mean predictive programming in like the maximalist sense, right? Where it's like planned. But I do think that, you know, certain ideas are, you know, kind of seeded in a way. It is interesting, right, that the correct reaction to, you know, intergalactic life is essentially like more managerialism, right? Do you think there's anything to that?
Fascinating that the aliens form a government that's exactly like the one we have, or that our leaders want, more accurately.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So yeah, I mean, it's like the alien is like a blank slate you can fill in with whatever you want, right? It's like whatever you want people to do. Make God, aliens are basically like the atheist god, right? It's like yet another makeshift god to replace the one that they supposedly killed, right? It's like aliens, the infinitely wise and angelic beings that just want what our government wants, right? It's like, come on, who you kidding?
Well, right, and so I'm curious, what do you think is kind of the life cycle of this, you know, this thing in Congress? Do you think that it's essentially just a 3-ring circus, right, where things are a little bit slow, there's not anything interesting to talk about, so let the UFO crank in, or do you think there's something to it?
So the way in which Grosh spoke was a bit of a weasel word to protect himself from perjury. Like, he was asked, why do you say UAP instead of UFO? Or why do you say non-human instead of alien? Like, he used the term non-human pilots. And his response, well, I want to keep a broad range of interpretation. No, you're protecting yourself from perjury for when it turns out that they're not aliens. It's not hard to see what you're doing. I'll post a link in the private chat real quick about this thing. I want to show you this. For about a decade now, it's been for a few decades, but for the last decade, there's been a lot of accomplished research in using living neurons to pilot robot bodies. You basically set your if you open it as a screen share, I can talk about it better, actually. If you don't mind. I don't know if you can do a screen share again.
Yeah, sure. Just give me.
Yeah, no worries. So you take a cell culture of neurons. Usually it's a rat brain. Occasionally this research has done fetal neurons, which is kind of messed up in my opinion. And so what you do is you take the living neurons, you prepare them on a little petri dish, and then you connect them to what do you call it? Diodes, electrodiodes, or surfaces where they can interface with electricity, and then you train the neurons the same way you like train like an AI art model, where if it does something you like, you positively reward it with signals that the neurons like, which is usually like a pattern. Neurons like slow repeating electrical signals, and they don't like random noise. And so based on this positive negative relationship, you can train a neural network, like a real living neural network, to basically do things. If you scroll down a bit, you can probably see a bit more of the imagery of how it's done. Now this has been research going on for quite a while. They're right there. Those grids are basically like positive and negative rewards. So if the orange squares are like they create a positive electrical signal and the white squares create a negative electrical signal, the neurons in the little robot will trigger the wheels on the robot to get to the orange, and it'll pathfind itself. It's like a computer that can write its own code, basically.
And so is that the advantage of this over more kind of traditional digital architecture, right?
If you train these neurons on a few basic premises, they can usually outperform algorithms because they're adaptive and they're writing their own code rather than being limited to the skill of a coder. So if you have a mice like a pool of mice neurons piloting a drone in the sky as an experimental craft to see if it could like outmaneuver guns, and then it crashes, and then another department that doesn't know what that department's doing finds the wreckage of this craft, they'll register it as a you can say, oh, it's a non-human pilot, right? It's a rat brain. It's not an alien, it's a fucking rat brain.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about this, right? Is that there's this Republican congresswoman from Florida, Paulina Luna, I think is her name, Anna Paulina Luna, and she's been kind of a central figure about this because, in addition to kind of playing this up and increasing her, which I don't want to be overly cynical, but let's be honest, this is a nobody who's become a somebody, because of this. Because of this case, right? She's the one where a lot of that language has come from, right? Like I want to actually specifically quote what she said, because based on the evidence that I have seen, the technology that exists is something that I don't think any government has currently. When I was at Elgin Air Force Base, I did see a photo and also talked to the pilots of something that was definitely not created by the DoD. And she's kind of pushing the national security angle. But she's the one where she's the one where that, I guess, like specifically like phrase like non-human biological material came from.
Yeah.
Which is interestingly phrased, right?
It's phrased to protect against perjury, because if it ever comes out that it's just a rat brain piloting a robot, then, oh, well, I still said it was a non-human biological material. Shut the hell up. Come on. Like, who do you think you're fooling? I
right.
mean,
like that could be something as simple as like, well, it crashed because it hit a bird.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, if you're being that vague about it.
And I guess they're gambling that by the time they have to, I think there's like a 50-year release limit for when the information comes out. If this comes out that like in 50 years, she'll probably be retired or dead. She doesn't care. Well, why would she care? But she got those.
And let's be honest, like who's going to go through the effort of tracking her down? And so I think that's why, because if you read through what they're saying, a lot of it is basically basic political talking points stapled onto this, right? So like people saying things like, oh, like, talking about government secrecy or talking about, rampant DoD spending, which, let's be honest, are both problems, but it's kind of a headline grabbing way, at least in my opinion, to kind of, bring out old political horses, but with a clickbait kind of touch of paint, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to troll this a bit. There's a YouTuber, Thought Emporium, who's currently training a neural network to play Doom. like he wired up the neurons to play the game Doom, and he's about like 3 months into training the neurons to play Doom. And I kind of want to like try to do that experiment myself, and then like throw it off a cliff and say, an unknown, a non-US aircraft. I found the wreckage of a non-US aircraft, and it likes Doom. The aliens like Doom.
That's why they're here naked on vacation. They're just like wandering around looking for some way to play Doom.
These aliens are starting to sound a lot like neckbeard losers in their basements. I gotta tell you. Like there's so much like weasel words going on in here. Whenever Congress doesn't, whenever like you saw, whenever Congress makes up these like new language to describe something, it's protection against perjury. A team of lawyers were involved with it. They've made up these words to protect themselves from perjury. If they're ever found out that they're lying out of their teeth, like, well, I still technically said it's still technically non-human. It's a rat brain. Oh, I didn't know it was not aliens. They told me it was non-human. Like it's a way to protect yourself. It's nonsense. If it was actually aliens, they'd say aliens. If it was actually something impressive, they'd say these things. They're not saying the proper language of what's related to aliens because they're protecting themselves. It's all just like Nuovo language. There's a French term for it, but newspeak. Anyway, like that's the basic premise. Like Grosh is essentially protecting himself. That they probably, like I said, actually, I think there was one congressperson who pointed this out. Like, we know that different departments of the Army, of the intelligence community, of the FBI, of the CIA, they have these like research groups that don't communicate with the government or themselves, and sometimes one of them screws up and something crashes, and another department finds it and they don't know why it is. And so when they're writing their report, their very official report, they have to use vague language that doesn't breach security. Oh, we found this non-DoD aircraft with non-human pilots, and in reality it's like a Air Force drone with rat brains piloting it. They're not allowed to say
it's
that.
Essentially like a the horrible combination of like a pet store and like a remote control helicopter.
Exactly. And that's why these craft are always so small. It's not because they're tiny green men, it's because it's tiny green rats. It's like it's not
Jeez,
that hard.
The future's so gay. Like what?
It's like, yeah, I mean yeah, they want to basically train these neurons to pilot unmanned vehicles to have a rat brain drone strike some poor brown kids, right? That's what they're doing.
Yeah, well, and that's I think I guess like the interesting thing about this is not necessarily, at least to me, right? It's not really anything that's being said. It's kind of more what this kind of reveals about how kind of media and politics and defense industry, how they work together in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I feel like and this is a weird bit of projection, right? Because there's this kind of trope of, the Nazi wonder weapon, this kind of like whiz bang gadget that's going to change war forever. But the weird thing about it is like that's kind of a singular obsession of, the American defense establishment. And you could make the argument, well, that's because it's the endless money pit, right?
Yeah,
like it's the world's biggest, pot of gold ever. No. And if you have a unlimited number of expensive experiments, it's a pretty good way to get rich. But I don't know. I guess to me, it's almost like you're kind of missing the point by focusing on the UAPs or whatever.
Yeah, it's like UAP is such a such a weasel word. What does it mean? Like unknown aerial phenomenon, which is like that could literally be anything. If I farted on an aircraft, that's a UAP. It's like an unknown aerial phenomenon. It's so dumb. It's like such a weasel word, and they just cocked that word up like out of thin air in like the last couple of years, out of nowhere, basically. Because if you say UFO, unknown flying object, well, it implies it's unknown, it's flying, and it's an object. If you say UAP, you could say a lightning storm is a UAP, like a bird strike on a plane is a UAP. You can. It's a weasel word because you encode the mystery. And then you use that mystery to apply to like ordinary things that haven't been fully documented yet, right? It's like, come on, like just it stinks of dishonesty.
So it's interesting. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that Roswell had been largely debunked. And I've actually been to Roswell. I've been to the UFO museum there, and it's obviously a complete and total tourist trap, right? It's basically a Ripley's Believe It or Not on half the budget. But I'm curious, could you, if you have it, kind of like easily to hand, could you explain why you view, Roswell as being completely discredited?
Well, it's 1947 when the United States is experimenting on all the Nazi aircraft they captured. So you got like the flying wing and a lot of UFO looking craft. Like the Nazis built UFO shaped objects. And so they're testing them out in the deserts with the nuclear bombs too. And probably it was a flying wing when the German craft that crashed. The photograph of the weird blimp with weird items on it, that was probably like something else that happened at the same time that was unrelated, that was just used to cover. At the U.S. event, I called this the domestic U.S. policy of send out the clowns. It's like an official U.S. policy. It probably has a better name. I call it send out the clowns. So you have an experimental aircraft that you don't want the public to know, and you screwed up and you crashed it. How can we make the public laugh out or get afraid or just like cover it up with mystery? Let's shoot down a blimp with crazy letters on it, like handwritten letters on it, and call it a UFO. Everyone's talking about the UFO and not the actual downed like experimental German aircraft, right? The policy of send out the clowns has been done time and time again. Like I think QAnon was a lot of that. QAnon was like sent out the clowns, basically.
Well, definitely, right? Is that, and this is actually an interesting parallel because there's sort of something about QAnon, which is that like it's exactly the enemy the regime wants to fight. You know,
but it doesn't exist.
Well, right, but I mean, like, it's basically like to me, it's exactly the same thing as in like, you know, when the Roadrunner draws a giant X in the desert, you know, hoping that, you know, Wile E. Coyote's going to stand on it, and then there's an anvil over its head. That's sort of what I see with kind of like QAnon, and from another perspective, right, Christian nationalism, where there's sort of a regime kind of builds a target, you know, lets it gather steam, and then demolishes, you know, kind of like their own golem, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
it is. It's exactly that. Sorry, go on.
So to kind of pivot a little bit, I'm curious, what is your own, you know, personal opinion on extraterrestrial, excuse me, life? Because I don't know if we ever addressed it when we had the 3-body problem talks.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the dark forest theory, but like, you know, I have a very basic radio telescope. I like listening to the songs of the stars and hearing the different signals that they put out. It's very like calming and relaxing. You just point your little like antenna at a star, and you just hear its heartbeat as it you know, nukes itself light years away. I never hear any intelligent signals. I never hear like anything else. And if you look at the site, so there's a really, really good book. It's called A World from Dust. The author's name is, let me just get it. A World from Dust by come on. Ben McFarlane. Ben McFarlane is he's a Christian, but he's also like a pretty accomplished academic. He's kind of ambiguous on if he's like young Earth or old Earth, and I think he likes to keep that ambiguous. But his book, A World from Dust, is well respected within the academic community, regardless of his religious beliefs, because it's really quality work. One of the things that he did is I think he's a geologist, and he analyzed the rocks on Earth, the kind of rock species that we have on Earth. And he found that Earth had about, I think it was 4,000 unique mineral species. If you look at any of the planets in the solar system, and mind you, we've only really seen the surfaces of them, but we also have asteroids, which you can kind of view as like spilled guts of failed worlds. On average, they only have something between 400 to 800 mineral species. This means that there's a power of 10 more mineral species on Earth than anywhere else in the solar system. Now, how do we know this? Every mineral species, when you shine a light at it, it creates a spectrum map. You know, you ever seen in college or high school, like the rainbow of light spectrums and the missing lines where the minerals are there? Like the minerals, you know, the minerals that are there absorb spectrum lines, and what's left goes out. So you by tracking out the different mineral spectrums, you can get a basic map of the light that forms. You don't need like a clear photo of something to know what minerals it's made out. This is why we can tell what minerals a planet has like in another galaxy, even though we can't get a clear photo of it, because a single photon bouncing off the surface of that planet gives us a pretty clear read of the data of what's on that planet. And if you point our spectrum analysis tools at any star, at any planet, anywhere in the universe, so far, we've never seen more than like 800 species from any planet anywhere in the universe. You point it at any planet in another solar system, same 800 or so species of rock. You never really get. I think the most found at one planet was like 1,200, and essentially, no matter where you look in the universe, you do not see the unique rock species that are on Earth. And the reason why Ben McFarlane says that the reason why we have these rock species is because they're the kind of rock species that form with liquid water and oxygen in the atmosphere, like a biosphere. These are rocks that form in the presence of a biosphere. They can't form without a present biosphere, at least according to carbon-based life on Earth. So based off of that science, Ben McFarlane basically makes a plain claim that we are probably the only life in the universe, because we haven't found any evidence that the rocks that form on a biosphere are anywhere else. Those rocks are truly unique to the Earth itself, and no matter where you look elsewhere, it's just not there. And you can imagine in the vast universe, surely there would have been at least one habitable planet that blew up or got hit by an asteroid or fell into the sun and spewed its guts out and formed a cloud, and would have formed like a nebula or something with those minerals somewhere in the universe. None. We just don't see it anywhere. So as far as we can tell from the spectrum lines, we're the only life in the universe. That's very depressing, but it is scientifically backed. Again, A World from Dust is a great book. Everyone should read it. It's just really quality research. I love that book.
So here's, and this is, I think, a difference in perspective between you and I. And it comes from the fact that I know absolutely nothing about science whatsoever. But to me, your comment about aliens being atheist God, I think is actually pretty insightful. And I think that when you see media, when you see, a discussion of a possible first contact, it's oftentimes kind of like attached to this idea that, wow, you're not special after all. Humans really are just a meat robot, spinning on a rock, and a not very special rock, floating through the vastness of the universe. And to me, I think that is that's kind of an ideological presupposition, right? It's not a scientific one. And they're very much linked. And I think it's also, linked to this kind of like recurring trope of like the hyper advanced, alien species, right? Like the forerunners, the old ones, anything that kind of came before that you see in a lot of sci-fi. And it's the idea, right, that essentially like humans aren't, unique or special. They are kind of, and obviously humans are, biological, right? But the idea of the unique human soul is a myth. And so do you see any of that in the discussion about, extraterrestrial life?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. They always are you, sorry, just to know, you're asking if there's any like, could you repeat the question real quick? Sorry.
Sure, I'll say it in a more succinct way. Do you think that the way, aliens or extraterrestrials is compromised by like an ideological presupposition that humanity there is no such thing as a human soul?
Well, I do see a lot of spiritualists that get attached to the concept, saying that, oh, our souls are like, all aliens have souls and stuff like that. I see it on both spectrums. For the scientists, aliens are an atheist god because they're essentially proof that we are average. Atheists want Earth to be average because it means there's no creative like spirit in how the Earth looks or is. And if you believe the universe is random chance, then those random chances should play out as an average across the universe. It makes it obvious that the Earth is a unique phenomenon, and it's scary because it means that, well, instantly, if you're a scientist and you are educated, you do feel the weight and responsibility of having to take care of that thing. You can't be just a cold scientist calculating machine. You actually have to give a damn because you are unique. You are the only life in the universe, and you have to cherish and protect that. And that's scary for a lot of atheists because they don't like that. Like a lot of times people become atheists because they're afraid of responsibility. They're afraid of the moral call, the call to reason, the call to morality. They don't want to deal with those things. They want to like dismiss those things as like, spooks. But once you realize that you're the only life in the universe, regardless of your religious beliefs, you now have a moral responsibility to take care of that planet and the life on it. You have to spread it to the universe. You have a call to a mission. Surprisingly, it aligns with the biblical call to go out and fill the world, or fill the universe in this case, right? And so it's like this very annoying thing for atheists because if there's plenty of life in the universe, who cares if we go extinct? You can keep being your melodramatic, like self-centered bullshit self. But if you are the only life in the universe and you are unique and you are seeing the obvious sign that we are a created thing, you have to take responsibility. It's a call to responsibility. Likewise with the spiritualists, with like the more like Zen Buddhist kind of type alien people. Oh, the aliens they're pacifists. They want us to just get along, man. That kind of thing. The aliens are like a projection of what you wish people were. It's this like kind of like this golem that you can shape into your ideal man. like, well, aliens are what we should be. And of course, go on. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Well, it's I think too that there's this idea of, and expressed in an atheist materialist way, of the unfallen man, right? That there is like a civilization out there which is the perfect, the perfect, rationalist materialist society.
Yeah.
And I think that, and you described very succinctly the point that I was kind of getting at, that, if we are in fact special, if we're unique, that brings up a lot of very interesting, that brings up a lot of very interesting premises, right? And I think that there's also something about it, which is that if space is just empty, there's nothing really to argue against kind of like, building or exploring or colonizing, right? And I think that there's this kind of like holdover Gaia myth that, humans and, human expansion is, evil and wrong and a virus. And I think that, if there are other things out there, it's sort of unspoiled, right? That there is something to preserve. There is kind of like a broader, nature. Versus if it's all just empty, it's like, well, life might as well expand. And I think that that's also something that will come up.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing how humans project their internalized moral systems onto the universe, because the universe is really a blank slate that we haven't looked into. We haven't peeled behind that curtain yet. There could be aliens, and they're just way beyond anything we could imagine, but I haven't seen the evidence for it. I tend to be very skeptical of the idea of aliens. To me, I kind of see this trend in humanity of just constantly wanting to make like what do you call it? Not subject. What's the word for placeholder that starts with like an S? Surrogate gods.
Surrogate.
Like they want like surrogate gods. When man, I'm Christian, so I believe that the Noah stories and all that. And so, in the pre-Diluvian world, man was projecting a surrogate god into their great Nephilim kings and leaders that seemed to live forever, and these were like their surrogate gods to serve for that god that abandoned them, basically, in their point of view. And then after the flood, when everything was in ruins and chaos, the sons of Noah started viewing themselves as like the surrogate god a little bit, and like that's why you have like Japheth's name show up as like the chief deity of a lot of European gods, like Deus Pater and Jupiter. Like these are names that all have typological similarities because they're looking to the ancestor, and the ancestor was the surrogate god. And then as those ancestors started dying, they started making images of those dead men, and the idol became the surrogate god. And the idol obviously wasn't alive, but it evoked the memory of the dead god, the dead ancestor, and those became pantheons and city gods. And then there's this moment in like the classical history where basically around the time Jesus came, a lot of the oracles and spiritual things in the classical world stopped working for some reason. I mean, we Christians know why. It's because the devil was defeated and all of his agents were cast out. And so like there's these works, but I think by Plutarch called like De Oracus Defunctum, which is a text about why the oracles of Greece have stopped working. And it's like right around the time Jesus was there. They don't know about Jesus yet, but all of their oracles have stopped working. And they come up with this term, Great Pan has died. Great Pan was the demigod that was responsible for communicating between the deities and mankind through the oracles. And so they thought, well, if the oracles aren't working, then the means by which the divine speaks to man has died. We would call this Satan. Or defeated, rather. And so there's this longing for a long time in the classical world with a new surrogate god. The oracles have stopped working. The idols don't save us. The ancestors are dead. The Nephilim are gone. What's going to be the next god? And that's when Christianity rushes in to show them the true God. And for about 1,000 years, that works. I give Nietzsche credit. Mankind was still trying to find a surrogate god, and so they killed God in a certain sense. And essentially, they replaced God with progress. Progress became the new deity. Progress was this thing that could always make something new. It could always stir some new thing in the world. And so progress was this like new surrogate god for about 300 to 400 years. And now progress is not going as fast as we had hoped. We just assumed it could just go on and like line go up forever, and that God is dying. That surrogate God is dying, and once again, society is looking for what's going to be the new surrogate God to replace progress. They've looked at climate change, maybe the Gaia myth. Maybe you have to like serve the god of the earth, like Earth as a god or mother goddess. Maybe power is a god to serve, and you get like a lot of progressives trying to replace progress with power. You see as progress halts, progressives are looking to power, to climate change, to aliens, literally anything their grubby hands can grab to be a new icon, a new idol. They're just looking for a new surrogate god. And aliens are this great surrogate because you can't find them, you can't see them, just like God, and you can make them whatever you want. You can like just invent a new alien species. They can just be this tabula rasa you fill in with all your hopes and dreams. And now instead of technological progress and social progress, you have this like noetic progress. Noetic is a word that means like mind or like mental progress, where like, oh, I'm going to project the utopian society into this mythical society in the stars, which is actually, that is an old way of doing it. You might remember all the utopian. This is a bit from architecture school, but in the 16 and 1500s, there were a lot of texts about utopia and dystopia, and like projecting the ideal society into these like made up lands far away, like Atlantis or whatever Gilbert's travels went to. I forget the name of the book, but like it's kind of like a reappropriation of that like myth making of like, oh, there's this perfect society somewhere you can't get to, filled with internal intelligences you can't see, but they have all the answers and they're just whispering them to you if you listen. Like, okay, that's a surrogate god, obviously. Sorry,
well, and there's sort of
there.
something. No, there's sort of something about this where, in much the same way, and I'm going to mute you. Sorry, I don't know if you're eating ice or something. Well, there's sort of something about this, and I see it in the urge for AI, the urge for UBI, the urge for kind of mass immigration. Where is this feeling, right? And we've talked about this at ends, that progress, that God has stopped working. That the line go up. Well, maybe the pace of the line is starting to slow. And I think that there is this realization in kind of the halls of power that like, oh shoot, like the machine isn't working like it used to. We're still offering sacrifices, but the harvest hasn't been so good. And so there's this kind of urge to cast around to find, a new solution, the thing that will supercharge progress and let it keep going. And so I think not necessarily that, aliens or AI are a god to replace progress, but I think they're sort of viewed as the kind of New Testament of progress, where, well, we don't really have a solution, so I guess AI will just fix it. Or, well, we don't have a solution, so maybe aliens. And so to me, I see there's sort of a desperation in it. Do you see that?
There's definitely a desperation in there. I've quoted John Michael Greer many times, but there's that like famous. I rearrange his quote. His quote's a little bit more tame, but mine is come to the grave Nietzsche dug for God, and you'll find progress being buried there. It's just, yeah. I mean, they are getting desperate. Sorry, I might have misunderstood your question, but it sounds like you're just rephrasing it.
No, I am, and kind of tying it back to a conversation that you and I have had before, right? That there's kind of themes running through this.
Yeah.
So if you want, we can kind of bring this to a close. Is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap up this discussion about AI? I guess there's really only so much to the actual specific story about it, the discussion in Congress, but I think that there's some kind of deeper themes in it that were worthwhile.
Yeah, AI is that other thing which they're trying to make as a makeshift god other than aliens. I wrote a short story that I never finished about the government faking a UFO crash and then having these like genetically engineered people come out and they were like raised to think they're aliens, but they're just like genetic constructs. And like the ship has a communication to their homeworld, but it's really just like a government bunker. And they kind of like come onto the earth and promise like the world to them. And it's just the government using like a mask to rule the world through the fake aliens. I'm gonna finish that short story, I think, and the whole plot would revolve around discovering that the aliens are really just man-made abominations that are like pushing state propaganda. But like I think that like this is just one of the they're trying to develop this card up their sleeve for. This is basically mining for new narratives that the government's been doing for a while now. There's the biotech narrative, there's the alien narrative, there's the AI narrative, there's the global security narrative. There's all these narratives that they're trying to prop up, and each one of them are each one of these are kind of backed by a little like clique in the government trying to like see if they can make some money off of this. But I'm not convinced any of them are really long for this world, because a lot of them are fundamentally just myth making and a lack of like. Given the lack of actual progress, the competency crisis growing, and the lack of like stability in the country and in the world in general, they're just looking for literally anything to get people to come around and stop like hating the government, because they know they're hated, they know they're not trusted, and they're just trying to use whatever they can find to keep it all together. This is just like duct tape falling apart from the cracking ship.
Well, right, and that's sort of a classic strategy. Right, is that, well, your real enemy isn't us, it's someone else, it's the wreckers. It's this kind of like and actually it's sort of similar to what you see with white supremacy in a way, right, where it's kind of this magical word, and you can sort of deploy it at will, much like the clowns. And so to me, it's maybe bring out the clowns, it's sort of like the American the American political rodeo clown.
Right? Yeah. I want this to be a term. I want people to just dismiss the government and say, "Oh, here come the clowns. Let's just ignore this clown show." Like,
well, let's workshop this term to make it a little bit more wieldy, and I think there's something there. But we have a few super chats, and just a funny comment, which is funny enough that I'm going to read it out. So Blood and Rain, who I will have on the show soon. Glad to see you back recording. Good to see you as well. And then Recovering Midwit, good chat, boys. And then Mike Oxlong, I think referring to our conversation about rocks. I want to see the spectrum analysis of this chat, which made me laugh enough to bring it on.
Yeah, you said his name wrong. You know what his name's supposed to be.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just not going to give him the satisfaction of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote 2 Substacks about aliens. Well, I'll put them both in the chat. Where is it?
And I think I have your Substack linked. So is there anywhere people can find you? Because I know that you've sort of stepped back from certain platforms.
Yeah, I don't trust Telegram fully. Sorry guys, the Restoration Bureau is closing down. I'll move it to Substack. But here, I'll let me just grab the 2 Substacks I wrote about this topic. Sorry, I always have to like, I should have these like ready to go.
Oh, no worries. Your Substack is actually linked, although your Twitter is not, because you keep changing your name. But yeah,
I've kept this name for a while now, right?
I don't know. I can't keep track of it.
Here's one, and here's part 2. So these 2 articles are basically my part 1 and part 2 of why aliens are just like a myth. I really don't think there are any aliens in the universe. I think we're the only life, and maybe there's pond scum somewhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just from Earth and fell off on a meteor strike and landed on another planet. I just can't see any reason why there are aliens. We're the first aliens. We're the first intelligent species of the universe, and it's our moral responsibility to go out into the stars and make it a livable universe.
Well, you know what? That's a pretty decent way to end it. So again, thank you so much for coming out, man. This is really fun. We had planned this episode for a while, but I had to take some time off and life got busy. So I'm glad to finally have it. And again, thank you so much for appearing on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And as far as my links, you guys know where to find me. The show's available on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. And back to it. Regularly scheduled programming, no more breaks for a little bit. And to everyone at home, keep your head up. The light can't last forever. Good night.